So, if any of you have seen Philosophy Tube's streams, this is basically just a ripoff of that method. I'm gonna go through a giant list of my notes to self about the video and just talk about them. We'll probably end up talking about, like, the making of it and things like that, and if you have questions about it, then I'll answer them. But for the most part, it's just gonna be me, criticizing myself in front of an audience, and then you people can criticize me also if you want to. I made a video titled Sanders and Warren, the False Comparison, and it was comparing, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, to poke holes in the media narrative that they are the same, because they're not. Things I missed and should have included, I narrowed it down to 5 topics that I wanted to focus on. I could have included one more topic, and so I covered climate change, Medicare for all, housing, college debt, and wealth taxation, which I kind of saw as the main things where people like see Warren and Bernie as the same, but they aren't. I should have covered their disability plans because, A, I don't know their disability plans in detail, and that would have been a helpful thing just for me to know. Yeah, they have these detailed disability plans that I could have included just as a way to, A, like, just shine light on issues that people don't talk about and don't know much about, myself included, obviously. And just because, like, there was room for that. I could have even just, like, included a little, like, footnote thing at the end of the Medicare for All section just to, like, shine light on the issue at all, because that's very intertwined. And like, disabled issues have been, like, vaguely on my mind, lately, because, I started working on subtitling my first video, and I made the decision that, from here on out, I want to have my videos fully accurately subtitled in English before I release them, just because, like, deaf people watch YouTube videos. I have a pal who's, like, who's majoring in American Sign Language, and they want to be an interpreter, so, like, I get earfuls of those issues a lot, and, like, it's important to think about, and it's something that, like, people in general need to be more inclusive of. So that related to the ableism thing, very minor thing. There's a bit in the video where I'm talking about Bernie's housing plan, and I'm like, there's so much stuff in this, pause it and read the list for yourself. Okay, but what if you're blind? Blind people listen to YouTube videos. You're missing out on a ton in doing so, and you can't control that. But, like, it would have been helpful for me to just read it. Like, just read it quickly. Then blind people don't miss out on that. Let's keep going along the lines of, like, what I should have done that couldn't have been, like, fixed in editing. Less production things and more just on the writing side of things. What could I have done in the script phase differently? This video, it's an hour long, and there is nothing to, like, intersperse the chapters to, like, keep your attention. It's just an hour straight of the same thing until you reach the, like, coffee mug skit, which is 8 minutes before the videos end. 7 minutes before the videos end. So the 48-minute mark in a 55-minute video, there's a switch and then an aesthetic change, but otherwise it's just an hour straight of the same thing. Philosophy Tube does this a lot, where the video itself is very much the same kind of thing throughout the whole thing, but each chapter, the light is a different color, so, like, that's a tiny thing that you'll at least notice, and, like, it's making you notice a thing, which will keep your attention on the video. Whereas, like, if everything looks the same and there's no skits or, like, anything to break it up to keep your attention, then you're kind of gonna glaze over. And I feel like this video definitely had that in spades. Just some things in the script every so often to, like, wake up the audience. I'm gonna keep going back to Philosophy Tube because he's the big example for everything. His latest video on data is a short film that's just 30 minutes of just basically Socratic dialogue between two people. The whole thing's filmed in black and white. Halfway through, it switches to color, and the conversation stops, and one of the characters just starts reciting a poem. I watched his stream about it afterward, and he said the whole point of that was just to keep the audience, it was just to make sure the audience is still awake. So, like, if you understand the poem's reference, then cool, you get that extra little bit. But if not, like, it's just there to make sure you're paying attention. It's a change. It's just a shift. I don't know what form that would take in this kind of video. I just want something to that effect where it's not the same thing for an hour. Oh, and along those lines, I want to do more like unique, I don't know, filmy things or skits or something. I actually had something planned that I had written out in the script and then just didn't do because I didn't have time to film it. I had an intro planned out for the video that was more than just like the... I have an actual cup. It was a montage of me like getting ready to go vote. The opening shot was like just me waking up in a panic, like, oh, it's election day, and then like monologuing to like an invisible person, like just someone, as if the camera was another person, and just like talking to them about who they're gonna vote for, and then just being like fucking incredulous at the fact that they're not voting for Bernie Sanders and they're voting for Elizabeth Warren. And then it was like this minute-long skit thing, and then it was gonna end on, I guess I need to write a fucking script then. It was a skit type thing with different shots and everything. Just before like you're settled into like an hour of the same shot. It was along the lines of like, just make sure it doesn't look completely the same the whole time. Okay, yeah, this is kind of fair. So when writing this, I kind of realized toward the end of the writing process, this isn't just a Bernie Sanders is good, Elizabeth Warren is worse video. It was also like, I kind of treated it as a vehicle to just tell the fucking world and establish on my YouTube channel, hey, did you know I'm a leftist? Because my last video is just like media criticism of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, whereas this one like was like the first explicitly like worldly political video. So it was like my first chance to like just get my opinions out there and be like, this is what I think. So that kind of influenced which topics I chose in particular. I talked about the military so I could go on a fucking rant about how raising the military budget is bad for X reasons. And as a result of that, there were some bits in the script that I felt were kind of preachy, and also some bits where I just like, I touched on things and then like kind of glossed over them. Jake actually pointed out when we talked about it the other day, there's a bit in the video where I talk about how Elizabeth Warren supports ICE and how that's a bad thing, and I kind of just gloss over the reasons that ICE is bad and how it was founded on like racist principles, and it's not even like a really important necessary part of U.S. border policy. It was established in 2004. There's a ton of like history to ICE that like goes behind that statement that I just didn't cover at all. So the statement really didn't need to be there at all, but it was there so that I could get out to the world, wow, I think ICE is bad. That didn't need to be in the script. I was treating this like half like a Bernie Sanders good video and half like a lefty manifesto. So it was kind of moved between voices every so often, I felt. Maybe I could do production side of things now. So you probably noticed that throughout pretty much the whole video, the light was reflecting in my glasses a ton. Let's try and get a visual on that. It's not near as bad as it could have been. I was definitely aware of it in the moment, like during filming. I didn't feel like there was much I could do about it just because of the environment in which I was filming. But like in certain angles, like there would be no reflection. I actually have no idea how this looks in the camera. At certain angles, there'd be no reflection, and then I'd turn my head and there'd be a reflection, which like is a lot better than there just being like a dot in my glasses the whole time. But like I can prevent that, and I should. So that's a really minor thing. Another thing that I realized after the fact, so I used a lav mic for this one, which I didn't in my One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest video, just because I didn't have a mic to record on. This is the Rode. I have it right here. Hey, look, it's the Rode Smart Lav Plus. I used a phone recording app, and by default, automatic gain control was enabled. And if you don't like know what that means, that basically means it's trying while you're recording to normalize the volume to like a decently like equal level, which is a good feature to have. It's a decent thing if you're like streaming or something, if you're recording a thing where you don't plan to edit the audio later. But obviously I planned to edit the audio later, so all the result was that like the audio was like less quality than it could have been because it was constantly like adjusting the volume throughout the recording, and that led to some distortion at some bits because it just didn't adjust properly. Like there were some bits where I screamed or even just talked loudly and the mic clipped, where if I didn't have automatic gain control on, I could have like just lowered the gain and then my loudest yell wouldn't clip the mic. So yeah. Okay, the green screen, I didn't hate it. I'm actually pretty okay with the aesthetic overall, but like I did mention this earlier, you can tell that my hair is shimmering and the chroma key did not like work well with my frizzy hair. And this is when I like put coconut oil and shit in it to keep it like to make it look nicer than it usually is, and to just keep it down so there weren't stray hairs everywhere, because the stray hairs really mess with the chroma key. Otherwise the aesthetic was fine, but it would have been like noticeably better if I just used a white screen instead of a green screen. That's just a thing I can buy in the future that I can use instead, or you know, do a different aesthetic. Other thing, voiceover bits. I recorded this one in a recording studio on campus, which was completely new for me. I've only ever recorded on the fucking Blue Yeti. For proper voiceover, you can do better. So I did. I checked out a mic from the library, and then I did a thing. It was XLR, used mixers and everything, and then I was way too close to the mic whenever I was voicing. So there are bits in the voiceover where I clip, which is, no, if you're recording in a booth, you just shouldn't have clipping. You just shouldn't, because you have the ability to prevent that if you're gonna edit the audio later. No, I was way too close. And that manifests less in the clipping and more in the fact that despite having a pop filter, there were plosives. Like you know how a pop filter works, like it's supposed to prevent that. So yeah, there were bits where like there was the was really bad because like I was close enough that it was going through the pop filter and into the microphone. That defeats the purpose of having a pop filter. Just fucking back up from the microphone. So, actual argument, content, critiques. For one, let's go to the, military budget section.
But she was trying to promote a plan to move the military, the government's largest polluter, to an environmentally friendly energy system. That's fine, I guess, but I feel like one of the first steps in keeping the military from polluting is probably to slash its budget a bit. Just a little.
So that's a fucking stupid argument, and that's not how logic works. So making fun of the tweet was fine. I'm okay with that bit. But then I elaborate, and I elaborate very poorly. I mentioned the context, which people don't normally bring up, which is that she was proposing a plan to move the military to green energy. And then I say, well, if you're gonna move the military to green energy, why don't you just defund it? That's how that works. As if, like, defunding equals decreasing pollution, when that's not how that works. That doesn't really map onto those are two aspects of an issue that don't really map onto each other. A pretty important thing that Donnie pointed out about that is that, along with the fact that those don't necessarily map onto each other, it might actually go the opposite way, because the reason that like most businesses use fossil fuels is because they're way cheaper than like energy or than green energy sources. So defunding the military without the proper like energy regulations in place might actually make the military pollute more because they have less of a budget, so they're gonna try and get more energy out of the cheaper energy sources, so they're still going to be using fossil fuels. Defunding doesn't mean less pollution from the military. That's a really dumb correlation to make, and that's not how that works. I thought it was weird in the edit, and I just didn't want to cut it because like I thought it made it flow a little weirdly. I feel like that would have been it would have been worth it to cut that and just deal with like whatever flow is weird, because that's just a dumb point. Like the content of the argument should be what's important above like how the video flows. In the foreign policy section as well, the North Korea spot where she's talking about Trump and North Korea. I still stand by this argument for the most part, but I do feel it's important to make a clarification that I realized after the fact.
Warren has also condemned the idea of Donald Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un for denuclearization talks, and her reasoning is a tad flimsy.
I want to see our president succeed, because if he succeeds, America succeeds, the world is safer. But I am very worried that they're going to take advantage of him.
Hold on, you're afraid of diplomacy.
Okay, so I then go on later to say that, like, mainstream Democrats at the time were condemning Donald Trump for meeting with Kim Jong-un because meeting with a dictator is a big bad thing. And I kind of cast them, I cast them as, like, anti-diplomatic, saying diplomacy is bad, just, like, threaten them and then they'll stop, which there was definitely a lot of that on the Democrat side, but there was also a good portion of them where their argument was that the president shouldn't be the one meeting with Kim Jong-un. It should be the State Department. We should conduct diplomacy that way because the president meeting with Kim Jong-un grants them, like, more legitimacy or whatever, that we shouldn't grant them, whatever. It's still stupid, but it's not, fucking do war at them. And I definitely cast them as just do war at them, when that wasn't really every side of the debate. That's a mischaracterization of, like, what the collective Democratic opinion on Trump meeting with North Korea is. So yeah, I still think, like, yeah, it's good that he met with Kim Jong-un, and more presidents should do that. Presidents should sit down with dictators and do diplomacy. But I implied that the Democrats were, like, being war hawks on this issue collectively. No, it was kind of a mix of that with, no, we should conduct diplomacy the old-fashioned way through the State Department rather than the president, which, like, not an argument I agree with, but still diplomatic. Whereas I portrayed them as anti-diplomatic, and that's wrong. That is a mischaracterization. I have a couple minor things. Like, for example, I used, like, super massive numbers a ton of the time when I was talking about taxes, and I would, like, switch between saying over 2 million and then, like, saying 2,562,000. Like, I feel like I needed to stick to one, and it should have been the just over 2 million one while showing the specific number on screen. If you want to know the specific number and use it in something else, it's there, but that does not flow well as, like, a writing or speaking thing. So that's a really minor thing. No one thought that. Production side, film somewhere less echoey. The filming here in this room it had better audio quality than filming in that shed. And granted, that was the only place I could film that I could find to, like, reliably, like, be alone and film the thing at home. Do you like the L and J cuts where the audio overlaps? Though I think you left the old take on just a little too long in some ways. I'd say do both methods with less intense of each. L and J cuts, as I said, were good, and I love the style. It's professional. I just think you dragged them too long. Okay. I think you're right in a couple instances. My philosophy on that was to cut on the blink. I heard this thing also from philosophy too that I didn't like follow to the letter, but I generally did, where, like, there's this editing philosophy that your brain is a better editor than you are. So you do a take and then you stop for a second and then you blink instinctively. And generally, it's a pretty good idea to just cut at the moment you blink, or a couple frames before you blink. There were a couple bits where, like, I think I kind of overcorrected for my issues with the last video, where, like, I would blink too quickly and there just wouldn't be enough for me to do a J-cut properly. So there were some takes where I did the line and then intentionally, like, just stared at the camera and kept my eyes open for as long as I possibly could so I'd have room. That turned out to actually bite me in the ass, because, like, if I just do it naturally, then, like, cutting on the blink just means there's just enough that the cut is natural. That's a pretty good rule of thumb that I learned just recently. And I generally followed that, but in some cases that meant, yeah, the take was a little too long. And yeah, watching it later, yeah, that made sense. I guess, like, big picture, it's too long. It could have been shorter. You brought up, and I agreed with you on this, you brought up that at the beginning, I spent way too long, like, just like, justifying myself in making this video and being like, don't worry, I don't hate Elizabeth Warren. Like, I did it because I liked the joke of, like, the Elizabeth Warren is garbage and here's why. And then Elizabeth Warren is garbage. Like I liked that. I liked that visual joke. It didn't need as much setup as I gave it. Like I did not need to talk at length. Like, don't worry, she's not terrible. She's just worse than this one. Like, that's not really a necessary disclaimer. This is just how primaries work. How do you get to writing that much? I find it really hard to put long stuff together. Me too. I didn't set out to write a long video, for one. This was supposed to be like a 15-minute, here's why Bernie Sanders is good and here are some weaknesses of Elizabeth Warren. Like, I tweeted and specifically was like, hey, do you want me to like make a video that I can get out in 2 weeks about the primary to like sway some votes if possible? And then I wrote 39 pages and released the video 3 months after that tweet. I was really only able to make this one so long because like I was passionate about the subject matter. Like I'm just really passionate about wanting to get Bernie Sanders elected. So this is my activism. I can feel marginally better about the fact that I haven't been volunteering with the campaign. Yeah, no, it started as just like a little ramble, and I was writing stream of consciousness, and then I was like, okay, let's apply a bit of structure to this. Here's like some chapters. Okay, maybe this will be a 30-minute thing. And then I started filling in the chapters with actual content. And then they were all long and could have been a video of their own, honestly. And this could have been just a multi-part like series. And more people probably would watch it. People make fun of Warren for being a policy wonk and like for making that the center of her campaign, and I definitely get that, and I understand. I understand that, and that's a critique of mine as well. However, that taps into specifically my sensibilities as well, because I'm a giant fucking policy wonk. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made this video almost entirely about just policy differences, as opposed to, hey, she was a Republican while Bernie was in the civil rights movement. That's a pretty important thing. Whereas it was just like a sentence in this video. People have made whole videos and written whole essays about that, and I could have done that. But because I'm a super policy-minded person, I made a 55-minute video almost exclusively about policy. Part of why I was hating this video by the time I was finished editing it is that, like, by the end of it, I just felt like the concept was flawed and outdated. Because, like I say in the video, Warren's been rushing to the center on a lot of issues, particularly like healthcare. Yeah, she wasn't aggressively flip-flopping the way she is now, and that can be its whole other thing that a person could talk about. It's like, just in the last week, she started accepting super PAC support. Like, and she justified it by saying, I did mention this in the ending monologue. The ending monologue kind of served to, like, briefly mention the holes that I wish I could have filled with this video, but I filmed it too early, basically. She accepted super PAC support and then justified it by saying, well, if the men have them, so should the women. Like, really? You were a lefty icon in America a couple months ago? You were the same as Bernie, and now you're like, well, woman, so that makes this okay. I'm not usually the one to be all like, man, identity politics is bad, because like I feel like people who scream about that are usually just using it as a way to minimize like actual reasonable dissent from like people of color and women and blah blah blah. But then you have things like, I'm a woman, so I should be able to have a super PAC. I don't have to stick to my principles because the men have super PACs. Bernie doesn't. You could fill that. You could fill that void as well. Take the moral stand. I like this. This is a good. I like this template of stream. I'm gonna do this for all my other ones. I'm just gonna shamelessly rip off the philosophy tube method, but I have fewer viewers, so I can like be more direct with like people and what they're saying. Okay, I'm going to sign off. I'll make another video one day. Okay, bye.